So thank you all participants for dialing in and attending tonight's webinar, which is a companion webinar to the one we did 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we did Pathways 101 Getting Started, and it was very well received. It's been put on YouTube about 2 days ago, and it's already received about 100 views. We are encouraging clubs and club members all over the district to use this, the first webinar of Pathways 101. And tonight's webinar will also be recorded once we've reviewed it for quality. And thank you for recording it, Alice. So tonight, what we're going to be focusing on, and again, the purpose of these two webinars, the one 2 weeks ago and the one tonight, is really to help the 95% of our members who are interested in Pathways. Many of them have enrolled, but they don't know what to do and how to get started. So tonight, we're going to be taking part 2 of this and looking at levels 1 and 2. We're going to be looking at strategies for working in level 1. Keep in mind that the projects in level 1 are the same for all 11 paths. And the projects in level 2 are largely the same for all 11 paths with some differences. And they're designed to help us discover personal strengths and to help the member determine a future direction in the Toastmasters program. But before we get started on tonight's curriculum, let's just do a bit of recap. Alice, if you could slide to the next slide. We're going to do some recapping there. And as you know, 2 weeks ago, we looked at the fact that everyone has got to learn how to use the TI website in order to access Pathways. And to log in, you need a username and you need a password. Your username can be either your membership ID number. And if those of you from the TIP Toastmasters Club that are logging in tonight, the club president or any club officer will know the membership ID numbers of all the club members. And that can be the user name that you can use to log in at Toastmasters and to set up and establish an identification. And then the password, that's something you will create, and that will be something only you and Toastmasters International will know. So let's go to the next slide, please. And of course, once you've set up your password, you've set up your identification, and you're able to log into the Toastmasters International website to do your Toastmasters, your Pathways work, then as you can see, you go to the Toastmasters International jump page, and the Pathways item is the second item from the left in the main button bar on the home page of the Toastmasters International website. So once you've logged into the Toastmasters website, you go to this page that you see on your screen now, and you'll click on the option at the second one from the left. You'll click on that. And again, if this is new to you, if you've never chosen a path, you would click on Choose a Path. But if you are already enrolled and you've chosen a path, then you would be going to go to Basecamp. Okay, next slide, please. One thing we also want to remind everyone is that, and again, this is a recap from the last session, is device compatibility. You can use Pathways through the Toastmasters International website on a desktop, on a laptop, connected to the internet, of course, on a tablet, on an iPad. The compatibility with smartphones seems to be in doubt and in question. I am not a tech person, but a lot of the folks that are trying to use it by smartphone are saying that it's not feasible, and TI is aware of it, and they're working on solutions. Next slide, please. Of course, once you've chosen Toastmasters, and again, this is a recap, there are 11 paths, and they basically support your goals in terms of 5 different core competencies. So, for example, the 5 core competencies are on the left side of your screen, and you can see that depending on which path you select, 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those core competencies are developed depending on the path. One thing to note about the 11 paths is that 2 of those paths are basically communication training only. They're basically only public speaking training only. The third path from the top, which is engaging humor, is all about public speaking and confidence. And the fourth path from the bottom, presentation mastery, is also about 2 things, public speaking and confidence. The other 9 paths allow you to develop not just communication training, but also management and leadership as well. Okay, I think we're ready to jump in now. And finally, one more recap from last week. As we've mentioned, of the 11 paths, every one of the 11 paths has the same structure with each other. Every path has 5 levels and 14 total projects. And in levels 1 and 2, all projects are required. Level 1, all the projects are the same. Level 2, they're pretty much the same. They're all required. And then levels 3, 4, and 5, that's where you get to branch out and specialize and have some fun. Okay, and do a mixture of required and elective projects. Okay, next slide, please. So now let's get into the meat of tonight's webinar. The meat of tonight's webinar, we're going to be looking at 2 major topics. And the first topic tonight is strategies for working in level 1. Level 1. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of folks say, gosh, you know, I'm not sure which of the 11 paths I want to pick. I haven't really made up my mind. And Alice, I think you might want to just work with the side screens there on the right, because there might be some distractions there. So just please take a look at that. Great. So you might want to, thank you. So you might want to choose one of the 11 paths. And keep in mind, when you're choosing a path, you're not signing your life away. You can test drive level 1 in any of the 11 paths, and you can still stay in the CC and CL program. If you joined Toastmasters before May 15th of last year, if you were a member of Toastmasters at any point before May 15th of last year, you are able to do both the Pathways program as well as continue in the traditional program. But let's say you joined only in the last 2 days. You can pick one of those 11 paths, and you have 30 days to evaluate and switch the path after you enroll. So if you pick the path and you started looking at it and you changed your mind, you say, no, I don't want to do presentation mastery. I think I want to be a dynamic leader instead. You have 30 days until the time you enroll to change your path, and there's no extra charge. And as we mentioned already, level 1 is the same in all 11 paths. So don't worry, be happy. Don't be afraid to commit to a path. Next slide, please. Now, for some of us who are familiar with the traditional program, the really cool thing about level 1 is that it is quicker. It will take you less time than earning an entire CC. And I think a lot of folks, you know, let's face it, we have busy lives. We love Toastmasters, but we do want to get we want to get more immediate feedback and recognition in terms of how we're doing. And so the level 1 is, the CC program was 10 projects. The level 1 is 3 projects and 5 meeting roles. 3 projects and 5 meeting roles. The 3 projects, as you can see, are icebreaker, evaluation and feedback, and researching and presenting. And when you analyze it, it really comes down to 3 projects and only 5 meeting roles. In the icebreaker, it's 1 speech. The second project involves 2 speeches and an evaluation. And the third project involves 1 speech, for a total of 4 speeches and 1 speech evaluation. You do that in a particular sequence, and voila, you will receive the proficiency, level 1 proficiency in your chosen path. So it's really exciting. Next slide, please. The next slide allows us just to look at this a little differently, and allows us to see that 1 recommended sequence. Actually, the way Pathways works, you must do your icebreaker speech first before you do anything else. In the old CC program, we had situations where somebody would jump in and for some reason do project 4 or project 3 before they would do the icebreaker. In Pathways, you must do the icebreaker first. Once you've done the icebreaker, then the other items in level 1, the 3 additional speeches, and the evaluation of another speaker can be done in different order according to you. Okay, so that's pretty much that's good. As we mentioned though, the first step in Pathways in any path, and the first step in level 1 in any path is the icebreaker. So let's roll to the next slide, please. Okay, so what this is a screenshot. It's a screenshot of what. Keep in mind now, remember what we're doing here. In the old program, the big difference between the old program and the new one has a lot to do with what people call modality. Has a lot to do with how we receive information and how we receive the curriculum. In the old program, the modality was the printed manual that was sent to us in the mail. And we would bring the manuals, we would read them, we would mark them up, they would fall apart, they would get coffee stains on them. That was how we received the curriculum, the key information. Under Pathways, it is online. And this is what a typical, when you go into the Pathways and Basecamp, when you download or you open your Icebreaker project, this is what you're going to see. Well, you won't see Getting Started All About You, but you'll see the rest of the screen. And you'll see that that's how it gets started. Now, a couple things to point out, of course, let's go to the next slide, please. The thing about the Icebreaker in Pathways is there are some new features that were not found in the traditional Pathways, in the traditional Icebreaker. One is, and we're going to be seeing that in a second, each project comes with a really great checklist that allows the member to work through the checklist, sort of like a to-do list. It really makes it easier for the member to organize their work. That's something that did not exist in the traditional program. The second new feature is each project will come with a speech outline, worksheet, or form that, again, helps the member, gives them a template, a worksheet that they can do to organize their notes and their materials, and it takes it from A to Z in terms of getting the speech done. There's also going to be videos with tips from veterans, and then there's also, each project will involve taking an assessment or quiz before you do the speech, and then taking the assessment or a quiz after you do the speech. To get an idea of one of the really new features, I just wanted to, next slide, please, Alice. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a sample of a project checklist. This is the project checklist, one page for the Icebreaker speech, a one-page checklist, really simple. And it basically tells the speaker what they have to do. And it's got 4 little items there. First thing, schedule your speech with a VPE. Then write your speech and give you some notes and rehearse your speech. And then after you've completed it, tells you what to do after you've completed the speech. We don't show it here, but there's also, like I mentioned earlier, there's a speech outline form. It's a 5-page PDF, a speech outline form that allows you to sort of plug into the recommended structure the material or the ideas that you want to use when you're delivering your speech. So that's just another great thing about the Pathways Icebreaker that was not available in the previous program. Again, just to recap, we also, in the Pathways Icebreaker, we get tips from veterans through videos, and then we'll have a quiz, a before assessment quiz and an after assessment quiz after we finish the project. Now, getting on, I'm glad thank you a lot, Alice. As you can see, when you open the material, I want to just take a quick second here. I wasn't planning on doing this, but when you open the material on Basecamp for Pathways, the first thing you see at the bottom center of your screen will be a drop-down menu. And the first thing the one that usually will show on your screen will be the word navigation, but you click on that, and that allows you to just plug into the different chapters, if you will, of the Icebreaker online book. Before we move on, each of these projects is available to you online by scrolling your screen from right to left. And there's a little button bar on the right and left-hand screens, on the right-hand sides of the screen that allow you to, they're like directional bars, and allows you to move, slide it from one page to the next. So you're able to access all this great stuff online. But you can also download the entire project into your hard drive and have that available to you in case you forgot to pay your electric bill or something, or your internet service broke down. So you'll be able to download the project and all of that. One thing is, I believe it is on the complete your assignment, usually the third from the bottom, will have all of the PDF files for the Icebreaker project and all the other PDF files. Now, one thing is, this is very important, the Basecamp, in order to progress in Pathways, you've got to embrace or at least tolerate Basecamp. Why? Because Basecamp is the system. It is managed by a vendor to Toastmasters International, a learning management systems vendor called Cornerstone On Demand. And Basecamp, as I mentioned, is the way by which we access all of the curriculum, all of the text online. However, a little thing about Basecamp and Pathways, it does not allow you to peek ahead to subsequent projects until you've finished the project you're working on. Now, how does it know, it being Basecamp, how does it know that you've quote unquote finished a project? Well, there are no hidden cameras installed at your club meetings to verify that you did the speech. So Basecamp cannot electronically verify that you completed a speech project that way. However, one way, and the only way that it will sort of know in theory that you completed a project, is when you do the assess your skills after segment on the Basecamp, on the icebreaker project on Basecamp. And so when you do that, and like I see, you can see it's 4 questions. Now the 4 questions that they ask of you are the same 4 questions that they ask you before you started the icebreaker, and they'll be the same 4 questions that they'll ask you after you do the icebreaker. And you will answer the questions on a scale of 1 to 5. And after you've finished the icebreaker speech and you've completed the assess your skills after quiz, 4 simple questions, then, and you've given numbers to those 4 simple questions, then it will give you it'll pop up on your screen saying, hey, these were your scores before, these are your scores after, and that is the signal that you have completed the after assessment and that you are ready to do. You will be getting you will be getting approval to move ahead to the next project, and that the icebreaker is done. Now, just one little anomaly, one little paradox or inconsistency. We've had situations where people, they're not trying to cheat or anything, but they got so excited reading all the materials in Basecamp for a project that they just read the stuff. They did the assess your skills before, they did the assess your skills after, and suddenly Basecamp thinks that they did the icebreaker speech even though they didn't. That's okay, and we'll work with it. It happens, don't worry. Just club officers and members, be aware of that. We actually, in my club, we had a member that did level 1 in about 2 days, because he just kept reading all the materials, doing the quizzes, and of course he hadn't done a speech yet. And that's not unusual, it happens, okay? Now, after you've done the icebreaker, you can save your icebreaker. Next slide, please. You can save your icebreaker for posterity in something called ePortfolio. We're not gonna spend too much time here, but there is a means by which you can do that. As you can see, one thing we did not mention is that everything in Basecamp, there are going to be online video tutorials explaining every aspect of how to do this, how to do that. And so I don't need to go over the mechanics of how to save a speech or save an evaluation of your speech into the ePortfolio. We went through that at our first session 2 weeks ago on how to store evaluations and do that. Okay, next slide, please. As we mentioned, level 1 is quicker than earning a sequence. This is a recommended sequence that you can use. And the next slide, the reason I wanted to put that out there one more time, you can see that sequence because it really flows to the next slide. I want to make an important point here. Next slide, please. And that is that we operate inside each level, no peeking ahead allowed. And that, so even though you might be interested in looking at the projects in level 2, 3, 4, and 5, you are not able to look at projects 5 until you've completed. You can't do the projects in level 5 until you've completed level 4. You can't do projects in level 4 until you've completed level 3. You can't do projects in level 3 until you've completed level 2. And you can't do projects in level 2 until you've completed level 1. And you can't do projects 2 and 3 in level 1 until you've completed icebreaker. So we operate inside each level, no peeking ahead allowed. I want to make it very clear to everyone, this policy was not mine. It was not Alice's. This policy was no one's idea on the grassroots level. I can assure you that no district leader asked for this. Believe me, we would all like to have our members have the ability to peek ahead to projects in subsequent levels. Believe me, none of us were consulted, and had we been consulted, we would have said no to this. The theory is that this is a problem that involves the vendor And Toastmasters has heard screams and complaints from every time zone around the world about this feature of pathways. And they've heard from me, they've heard from Alice, they've heard from everyone. And we pray and hope that eventually they will fix it so that members will be able to peek ahead to subsequent projects, just like we used to be able to in the CC and CL manuals, okay? So let not your heart be troubled. Please don't let this stress you out. Next slide, please. I want to just pull back for a second here. Everyone joined Toastmasters not to figure out how to do Basecamp. No one joined Toastmasters to figure out how to operate online with this new system. We all joined Toastmasters for what? To practice public speaking, to develop our confidence, to have fun with people at work or people in our community in the Toastmasters program. And so when you get a new member in your club, the question is, do we force the member, do we require the member to first master Basecamp before we get them to do the icebreaker speech? Or do we say, listen, new members, here's the printout, here are the key documents for the icebreaker speech. We're going to give you a copy, or we're going to send them to you as a PDF. Get started on the icebreaker speech now. Get scheduled, get on the agenda, get it done, have some fun. And we're going to encourage you to get caught up with Basecamp. We strongly recommend the second approach. Please, nobody joined our clubs to figure out how to do Basecamp, but they all joined clubs to have fun, to get jumping in, to start doing Toastmasters and giving speeches. So what I will do tonight for everyone who send an RSVP, and I'll make sure I'll send an extra set to the officers of TIP, is a little 30-page PDF that has all of the materials, the key materials for all three levels, for all three projects in level 1. Keep in mind there's a copyright issue, so don't share that with your aunt or your niece or something. I mean, there's an intellectual property right, so it's in theory we're only supposed to be sharing this materials with Toastmasters who are enrolled in Pathways. But I'm going to send it to all of you tonight because we want members to eventually get comfortable with Basecamp. Yes, 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 but we don't want the need or the imperative to master Basecamp to get in the way of their getting on the agenda and starting doing stuff. Get on the agenda and do their icebreaker speech. Is everyone clear with that? Are you okay with that, Alice?
So I want to emphasize this is only for internal study purpose. So right. You would use only for your club meeting. You will not use for other commercial purpose. And right. You also could download it if you're a club officer or even like a member. You could download by yourself, and then you could make a copy and bring to your club meetings. And this is also more helpful. Actually, I went to several clubs, and then they already kind of like pack the icebreaker, the very beginning, the project list, and the speech outline worksheet and evaluation guide. So basically, they are not very big. Add together, you could have a whole package, even put in your guest package there. So you help potential members to also get familiar with Pathway. So I think it's also good, but think more on that. And I want to emphasize it's for internal study purpose, and it will not be used for outside. It will not be used for commercial use. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Alice. Yeah, because again, Toastmasters might they might give us a hard time about that. So we're doing this for internal purposes. The item I'll send you is 30-page PDF, including a 1-page table of contents, and it covers all three projects in level 1. But as Alice points out, the items just for the icebreaker speech alone only cover about 4 or 5 pages. So you can decide as club officers, maybe just to share that 4 or 5 page item with the new members to get them started with the icebreaker. Okay, that way we don't want the whole Basecamp anxiety thing to slow people down from getting on the agenda, having fun, doing speeches, doing evaluations, okay? But we do emphasize that eventually if they want to move to level 2 and move ahead in the Toastmasters program, they will have to start digging into Basecamp and getting comfortable with the fundamentals. Okay, let's go to part 2 of tonight's webinar. Part 2 of tonight's webinar deals with ideas for successfully completing level 2. And the projects in level 2 are designed, this is very new to Toastmasters. They're designed to help you discover your personal strengths. And by that self-discovery, figuring out your future path, your future approach in the Pathways program. So this is something that's really new. Why don't we go to the next slide, please? A couple of people will say, okay, Mark, you gave us the idea, you gave us the information about level 1. How does level 2 compare to level 1? There are 3 similarities. The first is that level 1 had no elective projects. Everything in level 1 was required. And likewise, in level 2, your path will have, in level 2, required projects. And there are no electives offered to complete level 2. Electives are offered to complete levels 3, 4, and 5. In level 1, there are no variations between the 11 paths. And in level 2, there are a few variations between the 11 paths, but it is largely the same. Next slide, please. So let's discuss one big difference. One big difference is that in level 1, there were 5 meeting roles, 4 speeches, and serving once as a speech evaluator. But level 2 only involves 3 meeting roles. And next slide, please. Those 3 meeting roles involve giving a speech. So each of the 3 projects in level 2 involve doing one speech, usually a 5 to 7 minute speech, and or one meeting role, and then you get an evaluation and you complete level 2. Next slide, please, just to finish up that thought. And then after the end of doing the 3 speeches or activities, you'll submit level 2 completion requests. Okay, next slide, please. Now, level 1, as we mentioned, is the identical curriculum for all 11 paths. Level 2, it's largely the same with some minor variations. I've pulled out about 8 of the projects. There are, of the 55 projects in the Pathways program, and now it's actually more like 61. Of the 60 or so projects, separate and unique projects in Pathways, let's just look at 8 of them really quickly. Understanding your communication style is required in 5 of the 11 paths. Understanding your leadership style is required in 8 of the 11 paths. An introduction to Toastmasters mentoring is the one project, and we're going to be looking at that in some detail later, is the one project that is required to complete level 2 in all 11 paths. Next slide, please. And all of these involve speeches. Now, next slide is active listening. This is an interesting project. It is also a level 2 project, and it is a requirement in 3 of the 11 paths. And what is interesting about active listening is you do not give a speech, but you serve as a table topics master. And then in order to demonstrate that you've developed active listening skills, you're asked to briefly recap the answers or the responses to like the first 5 of the table topic responses. And then the person who's evaluating you will be evaluating on how well you listened to the table topic response and was able to effectively and accurately provide a recap of that table topics response. So that's active listening. It's a very popular, required, again, like I said, in 3 of the 11 paths, it is the required project for level 2. Go to the previous slide, please, Alice. So you can see how the numbers add up. In theory, it should add up to a total of 33. Okay, so you've got 11. Introduction to Toastmasters mentoring is required in 11 of the paths. Understanding your leadership style is required in 8 of the 11 paths. Understanding your communication style is required in 5 of the 11 paths. And generally speaking, active listening is kind of matched with understanding your communication style. Okay, and then you have other paths, other projects that are required in 4 other paths. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea. Bottom line, most of level 2 is the same path by path. Next slide, please. One other big difference. We mentioned that level 1 has 4 speeches and an evaluation. Level 2 only has 3 speeches. Here's the big, massive difference in the 2 levels. In level 1, we acquire skills and experience. In level 2, we achieve self-discovery. big difference. Achieving self-discovery was never really a major, explicit aspect of the old program, but it is something that's been lifted up and made a key element of Pathways, where we systematically use the Toastmasters program at an early stage in level 2 to achieve some self-understanding of how we're doing. So you can see that the 3 most popular and 3 most required projects in level 2 all are about understanding your communication style, or understanding your leadership style, or understanding the process of being a protege in order to better appreciate what's involved with mentoring. And if you may go to the next slide, please. Really, this is based, the whole concept of level 2, which is one of the really exciting and new features, something that is truly new in the Toastmasters history. Level 2, which is an emphasis on self-discovery, was really based on the theories and the philosophies of Dr. John Dewey. He was with a famous Harvard professor, and he was a philosopher. He was an educational theorist. Anyone who's a school teacher knows and is acquainted with John Dewey. And his whole view is that, yes, we can learn things from a book, but we can also learn things from observing or reflecting on our experience. And so developing and acquiring different speaking skills, as you can see at the bottom of this sheet, is about the CC program in level 1, but self-awareness and self-discovery is really about level 2. Next slide, please. And so Dewey, these are direct quotes. He was the one that coined the phrase learner-centered training. And here's the key phrase from Dewey's philosophy. He said, we do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. As human beings, we're not just creatures of habit or of instinct. We're also creatures, we're given reasoning and will and those gifts. And so we use our reasoning powers to reflect, to think, look back on using memory, looking back on what happened, reflecting on the experience, and coming up with some conclusions that we can use to move forward in our lives. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, the level 2 has 4 key projects: Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring, 11 out of 11 paths; Understanding Your Leadership Style, 8 of the 11 paths, they're required; Understanding Your Communication Style, 6 of the 11, and Active Listening, 3 of the 11. Now, of these 4 projects, 4 of them are key, but only 1 is universally required across all 11 paths, and that's the one at the top. And I just want to spend a little bit of time on Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring. Next slide, please, Alice. Now, when I first heard about this program, and when I first heard about the project Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring, my assumption, and I'm guessing it's the assumption of many of you perhaps, that this project would begin teaching me the basic principles and practices of how to be a good mentor. I thought, okay, great. I'm going to do this project and I'm going to learn some rudimentary, some basic skills that will help me be a better mentor. However, I was wrong. And other people who've made that assumption will be wrong as well. As I mentioned, level 2 is all about self-discovery, all about self-learning. The other big popular projects, for example, Introduction to Communication, Understanding Your Leadership Style, I should say, and Understanding Your Communication Style, is all about understanding your styles. If any of you have done Understanding Your Communication Styles, often it involves giving a speech about speakers you really admire, speakers you really think are great. And then you talk about why you admire this communicator and what are the aspects of that communicator you admire, and then you reflect on how you're going to use that in your own growth. Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring, it actually gets you to reflect on your experience as a protege, as the subject of the mentoring process. So in the speech, you're going to talk about share the impact and importance of having a mentor. I want to add here that a lot of you, some people have said, I think Kim Bourne is on the call, and this came up a couple months ago. Somebody asked, gee, I've never really had a mentor in my life, so I really don't know what it's like to be a protege. And I think it was Kim, area director Kim, who said, well, have you ever read a book that had a big influence on you? Maybe it was a self-help book. Maybe it was a scriptural document, a document from scripture. And then Kim pointed out that even something like that, you were mentored and guided by the author of that book. And in that sense, your mentor was the writer. It wasn't like the mentor was sitting down over coffee and giving you advice, but rather they were giving you advice through the beauty of the printed page and the power of the printed page. And so there you could even reflect on what it was like being a protege. If any of you have ever had a good relationship with a parent or a good relationship with a teacher, and some people I know have never had good relationships with parents or teachers, okay, we understand that. But if you ever had at least one good relationship, maybe with a teacher or with a coach, a sports coach, or with a friend who taught you how to dance, or with a friend who taught you how to kiss, whatever. That was essentially a mentor-mentee relationship. And so there in this introduction to Toastmasters mentoring, you will reflect on and think about what it was like to be a protege, share the impact and importance of having that mentor help you. And then on the basis of that experience and in your speech, you will begin to understand the value and what kind of mentor you would like to be when it's your turn to mentor. I want to add that the mentoring process in Toastmasters, this project is required in all 11 paths. It is also the building block of 3 additional mentoring-related projects. If you do those 3 additional mentoring-related projects, you will receive from Toastmasters International a certificate in excellence in Toastmasters mentoring. We have 3 members of our district that have actually completed all 4 projects and have received this really cool certificate: Amelia Abad, Jorge Wano, and Jean Boyarsky of the Frog Toastmasters Club. So hopefully that will answer some questions. Before we take questions from the floor, I just want to go to the next slide, please. A lot of people have asked me, okay, Mark, and this really kind of segues into hopefully a future webinar, which will be on level 3. A lot of people have said, yo, Mark, you know, one thing I like about the CL program is I get credit and I get guidance on how to do some of the non-project speaking roles. So one of the great things about the CL program is I get guidance when I'm a Toastmaster, and I get evaluated as a Toastmaster, and I get ideas for how to be a table topics master or how to be a speech evaluator, and I get credit for being a table topics master or a speech evaluator. Well, in Pathways, the CL program is not going to be part of Pathways, but the good news is that these 3 roles that you see in your screen, Toastmaster, Table Topics Master, and Speech Evaluator, if you do them, you will get credit. They're required, actually. They're required for you to finish level 3. Now, you may say, well, why are you telling us this, Mark? I mean, this is about level 3. I'm telling you this because while you're doing levels 1 and 2, you can do these 3 roles, Toastmaster, Table Topics Master, and Speech Evaluator, and eventually use them for when you're finishing level 3. And you do that, and again, the way Toastmasters will know you did them is when you go on Basecamp, and there's a section in Basecamp, which we're not going to go over now. It's in your personal profile section where you will actually put the date when you served as Toastmaster. You put like the month, like let's say today is what, April 25th, April 22. You would put 4/22/19. And that you would put that on the Basecamp. Basecamp will save that record so that when you get to finishing level 3, it will automatically have that information. It will do a search of your profile, and it will conclude that you've finished level 3. So it's just something to think about as you're working through levels 1 and 2, and as you're doing the Toastmaster role, and as you're doing the Table Topics Master role, and as you're doing the Speech Evaluator role. Yeah, as soon as you do those roles, go on Basecamp, and on your own, it's, again, honor system here. Using the honor system, you go in, and you'll put the dates when you did those 3 roles. Okay? So I think that pretty much covers that. We're looking now at about 7:46. We got about 10 minutes to take some questions, but I'm going to ask you folks to throw questions at us regarding the material. Let's give preference first, or priority, to questions that deal with the material that we've already shared tonight. And once we've exhausted those possibilities, then we'll take questions on anything else involving Pathways. Does that make sense? Before we do that, Alice, is there any comments or things that you'd like to share?
Yes, I have 2 things to share. So everyone look at the ribbon behind Mark.
Oh, yes. I'm modeling
it's level 1 to level 5 ribbon. So once you you or your club member finish each level, you will get the ribbon. And then we, especially in the spring conference, we bring all the ribbons in to the spring conference. So we also have a list. So you could come to pick up the ribbons for your club members. Yeah, this is the first thing. And the second thing, I also want to emphasize that even though you finish the level 1 or 2 in the pathway, you still need to ask your club VP education to record it in the Club Central. So Toastmasters International would know you finished level 1 and 2 and you help you for your DCP goals, Distinguished Club Program. So if you finish in base camp, but still not recorded in the Club Central, please do ask your Club VP education to do so. And because Toastmasters International Club Central and the base camp are two different systems, they don't communicate very well. And so I think of Quay Fun, our pathway coordinator, have a kind of tagline say, how to say, two systems, one path. But you need to go to Club Central and a base camp to make sure you all recorded, you complete that. Yeah.
Can they hear me, Alice?
Yes.
One thing, Alice has made a very good point about Club Central, and we will be sending you, I think many of you have already received the link to the YouTube of the previous webinar we did 2 weeks ago, Pathways 101 Getting Started. Today's webinar is the companion to that. In the one that we did 2 weeks ago, which is now a YouTube, the link of which has been sent to everyone, that includes information about how to go into Club Central and the distinction between base camp and Club Central. As Quay Fan, my colleague, has coined the phrase, one organization, two systems. Okay, so thank you, Alice, for pointing that out. So yes, that's all covered in the first webinar. I can't emphasize enough, all of you that are watching this webinar, if you're really so new to this, and you have, especially our friends at TIP, thank you, TIP Toastmasters, for dialing in. Please go to that first webinar that we created and that we posted this past week from 2 weeks ago, the webinar from 2 weeks ago. You really need to look at the two of them. And the one from 2 weeks ago and the one from tonight will really essentially cover you for the first year of the Pathways program. It will really give you an overview of everything you need for at least the next 12 months. Okay, we have a lot of other webinars that have been created on very specialized topics. Those are great to look at too if you have time, but if you need to prioritize your scarce time, look at the webinar Pathways 101 Part A and tonight's, which is Pathways 101 Part B. I think we'll take some questions now, Alice.
Okay, so everyone have a question. If you're on the computer, you could unmute yourself and ask a question, or you could type in the chat box. I think we only have one person down the phone call. You could unlock yourself, *6.
Okay.
So wait for any questions from.
Let me ask you a question for you. Let's do this as a quiz. Let's see who's the first person that can give the answer. The 11th path, as you know, they started out with 10 paths back in May, and they came out with an 11th path in early February. Does anyone know the name of that 11th path? Who's the first one to raise their hand on the group chat?
Humorous.
Oh, okay, who's that? Please, what's your name?
Tip, from Maurice at Tip.
Oh, very good. Marisa, is it?
Maurice.
Oh, very good, very good. That's right. Engaging humor was the 11th path. That was issued by Toastmasters International in early February, on top of the other 10 paths. Anybody? Here's the next question. I'm going to throw out these questions. Hopefully, that will maybe get some of you to start thinking about questions that you might want to ask. Of the 11 paths, which is the most popular path? That is to say, the path that has had the most number of people subscribing to it. Any guesses?
Dynamic leadership.
Dynamic leadership is very close. Who gave us that answer? That's a very good answer.
MSMITH.
Okay.
MSMITH. I don't know who, but
Great.
he or she types in. Michelle typing said presentation mastery.
That's correct. Actually, that is, I think, the most popular one. Hey, let me ask a question again on tonight's program. Of the projects in level 2, which one project is required in all 11 paths? Anyone have the answer to that question?
Mentoring.
That's right. Who got that answer first?
That
Tip.
was Tip.
Oh, Tip.
Very, very good. I'm so impressed with you. Next question. Let's say you enroll in a path, but my God, after a few days, you're not really sure that was really the path you wanted, and you want to switch. How many days do you have until after you enroll in path? How many days do you have to switch?
30 days.
Up to 30 days.
Okay, who answered that one?
Islamia.
Oh, Islamia. Islamia is one of our new, I think Islamia, this is your first webinar. And
Yes.
I want to commend you. It's always the newcomers. I think so far tonight, so it's basically been new people, right? Alice has been answering these questions.
Linda also says.
And Linda Biolecki has also been paying a lot of attention. Great. Hey, quick question for you guys. Every path, as we know, has 5 levels. But to complete an entire path, levels 1 through 5, how many projects do you have to complete?
14. Linda
Did you
said
say
that.
14? Who said 14?
Linda.
Very good, Linda. Those area directors, boy, they know their stuff. Generally speaking, is Pathways device compatible with smartphones? Yes or no? Who's the first one to answer that question?
No.
No.
Yes.
Okay, so basically everyone got that right. It's generally not compatible with smartphones, generally speaking, and that's why we recommend you to use desktops, laptops, tablets, and iPads. Very, very good. Okay, question everyone here. The level 1 involves, it's 3 projects. This is true, 3 projects, but how many meeting roles to complete level 1?
3.
Okay, 3 projects, but the number is actually higher than 3. Okay, that's okay. Just recap again. The level,
5.
that's it. Who said 5?
Michelle.
Michelle. Is that Michelle Siegel?
That's right. Hi, Mark.
Global Expressions. Those people in Global
Yes.
Expressions, they know their stuff. So that's right. The level 1 involves 3 projects: icebreaker, researching, evaluation and feedback, and researching and presenting. The first and the third projects involve doing 1 speech, but the middle project, which is evaluation and feedback, involves doing 2 speeches and also serving as a speech evaluator. So the total is 5 meeting roles, 1, 3, and 1. And those 5 meeting roles were organized into 4 speeches, an evaluator, and then 2 more, basically 4 speeches and serving as an evaluator. Great. I hope that that got through.
So MSMITH also answered that 5 meeting roles.
Great.
And I also come in, have a question. Do you have 30 days to make changes for all the path?
Yes, you have 30 days to change your entire path. So if you chose presentation mastery, and then you started reading more about pathways, and you said, "Gee, I want to do more than just public speaking. I think I also want to develop my coaching skills." So then you can switch from presentation mastering to effective coaching as a path. And yes, that will affect all of your future. That will affect everything you do in levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's correct.
I have a question.
Yes.
What if you already have earned your CL in the the CL manual years ago?
That is great news. Now, you earned the CC and the CL, right? May I identify who you are, your first name?
My name is Cheryl. I'm with Charles Riley.
Is it Cheryl?
Cheryl Jenkins.
Okay, well, very good. Okay, so you've done your CC and your CL.
Oh, no, just my CL.
Okay, you've done your CL, great. So that means you were a Toastmaster before May 15th of last year. May 15th was the rollout date. And they had an interesting rule, Toastmasters, that anyone who had been a member at any time before May 15th will have the opportunity to continue doing work in the traditional program until the middle of next year, until June 30th of 2020. So since you were a member before May 15th of last year, and we know that because you just indicated that you've done a CL, you then have the option of completing the CC or the ACB or the ACS or any of the other projects in the traditional program and completing them until June 30th of next year. So you'll have about 14 months to finish up any work that you care to do in the traditional program. And at the same time, you can also simultaneously also be working in Pathways.
I want to know, I just want to start with Pathways and
Start with what?
Since I've earned the CL, can the CL roll over into Pathways?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, as I mentioned this earlier in response to another unhappy situation, this was not something that any of us in District 46 wanted or asked for, but unfortunately, Toastmasters is telling us that we are not going to get equivalent credit. We're not going to get equivalent credit in Pathways for any work that we did in the traditional program. So, and a lot of people have asked us about the CC. They've completed a CC, and they'll say, gee, can I get quick credit for, levels 1, 2, and 3 in a path? I've done the CC. Though you and I might think that's a logical thing, and I do think it's logical. I appreciate the logic of that. Toastmasters International made a ruling going back a couple of years that no, we would not be able to get equivalent credit in Pathways for any work that we completed in the traditional program.
So when I start Pathways, it's like just starting all over from the top.
Well, that might be true if you had done some speeches in the CC.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done speeches in the old CC program?
Yes.
How many?
4.
My advice to you would be, personally, again, it's up to you. I would do those 6 speeches, projects 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and finish the CC.
Okay.
Keep in mind that you have only 14 more months
Okay.
to finish the CC. Now, and that might be, I know that's a big accomplishment. And a lot of people, after they finish the CC and the CL, say, you know what, I've achieved my goals in Toastmasters and I'm going to take a break. And that's a very respectable approach and response. At the same time, if you decide you want to, after you've done the CC and the CL, and after June 30th of next year has expired, if you want to stay in Toastmasters, then you'll have to do Pathways. And there you would start by doing the icebreaker again. But that's okay, because every day of our lives, we're constantly presenting ourselves to people. So it never hurts to get practice in the icebreaker and how to present ourselves to others.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Looks like we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Alice.
So Mark, we have the final question from
Yes.
Carmen. Instead of having an icebreaker for each path, why not have a level 6 instead? It's kind of suggestion.
I think it's a great suggestion. What's the name, Carmen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, a lot of people, and I'm with you on this. A lot of people have said, gee, why do we have to, if we're doing a second path or a third path, why do we have to start with level 1 all over again? I think there's an argument for doing that, but I also think there's an argument for giving members choice. Unfortunately, Toastmasters is not giving us that choice. And so for this suggestion that you've had, Carmen, as well as the suggestions about allowing us to peek ahead to subsequent levels, and there's been other suggestions made, I'm going to strongly emphasize that you should assert your rights and your privilege as a Toastmasters member and organize your thought or suggestion into a 1 or 2 page, concise and intelligently written letter or email and send it to Dan Rex or send it to Toastmasters International and tell them this is my suggestion for improving Pathways.